Welcome to another edition of What's the Big Idea, where we hear big ideas from some of the leading voices shaping current and emerging best practices in both the professional and nonprofit world. I'm your host, Hank Boyer, CEO and founder of Boyer Management Group. Today, we're speaking with Sean Kelly, who's the Chief Information Officer, Business Platforms for Dentsu International, a global media company. Sean, welcome to What's the Big Idea. Tell us a little bit about your work at Dentsu International. What do you do?
Thanks, Hank. At Dentsu International, I'm leading the team who's accountable for our back office systems, sales, finance, HR, resource management, those kind of systems. I lead a team of about 450 people scattered all over the world.
And so how many systems are you supporting, the discrete systems are you supporting in your role?
About 20 global business platforms, which we're in the process of rolling out. But if you include all of the legacy platforms we're replacing, it's probably around 600.
Wow. So in your role as a CIO, where is your workforce located?
Everywhere. We have a central hub in India, but we really have people scattered around 20 time zones, distributed globally.
20 time zones? I guess you must have been a user of virtual technology for long before the pandemic began, if it's 20 time zones.
Yeah. Dentsu was an early adopter of Microsoft Teams, and we'd been using it quite heavily before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we went from BAU centralized in the office to BAU working from our bedrooms.
So how do you deal with, I'm really curious, how do you deal with the vastness of it all? I mean, if you're connecting people across 20 different time zones, it's not as simple as, okay, we've got a pandemic, we're all going to work from home for a couple of months and then come back to the office. I mean, this is, as you say, business as usual. So how do you manage this remote process?
Communication is really important. And as you can imagine, communication to a team that's scattered across that broad range of time is difficult. So we did things like splitting up our all-hands sessions and running a morning session for APAC, an evening session for the Americas, those kind of things. Use newsletters as well as use the management chain for Cascade. But that does, that's a one-directional communication. That's the only things to the team. It doesn't really let you have things roll back up or get any real comms and engagement with the team.
I think everybody will agree that 2021 was a very challenging year. It was a full year of the pandemic, so remote was the whole thing that we did. But earlier in 2022, this year, you saw a need. You just mentioned the issue of it being single directional. You saw a need to innovate and connect with your team, perhaps in a way that you didn't do before. Getting personal virtually, if it were. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, well, I'd been discussing the challenge with my wife and my personal assistant. And my wife, Catherine, suggested that her boss runs open door sessions once a week or once a month. And my personal assistant had suggested that she'd seen something similar previously. So my personal assistant, Sarah, and I cooked up a cunning plan to run an all-day open door session for the whole team and just allow them to drop in and raise and chat about any issues that they wanted to and get to know me, basically.
So how did people respond?
Brilliantly. I had about 90 people dial in through the day, which is a good proportion of the team. The engagement was really strong. They were really happy to chat to me. Their feedback afterwards was great. I was able to cascade a whole bunch of messages, but also really hear from them, meet them, have that kind of interaction that you used to have in the office. And it was great to really build up those personal relationships with people again.
So 90 conversations. What were your key learnings from doing this, and what would you do differently?
Key learnings is preparation is great. Have some material ready to talk about with the team. Sometimes the conversation is long. So being able to say, hey, let's talk about strategy. Let's talk about what's going on with the budgets or whatever other things might be interesting is great. Also take notes. Your team are a gold mine of information, and what you get from your management team isn't always going to be the full story. So being able to capture some of those detailed items so you can act on them is really important. In terms of lessons learned, the one big lesson I would suggest is that running an all-day session is great in theory. It's grueling in practice. And by the end of the day, I think I was speaking to my American team. I was hoarse. I wasn't really giving them my best. And I think it's worth investing in a team and splitting it up into a number of sessions so that they can engage when they want, and you can actually focus and really give them the attention they deserve.
Excellent. We've been speaking with Sean Kelly, CIO of Business Platforms at Dentsu International, here on What's the Big Idea. Sean, what is the big idea that you'd like viewers to take away from our discussion today?
The big idea is really to use the tools that you've got and drive a simple and open communication by having an open door session with your team. It's easy, it's cheap, and it really drives up engagement. My team really appreciate it. I'm sure yours will too.
And what's the website where people can learn more about Dentsu International?
Dentsu.com.
Dentsu.com. DENTSU.com. I want to thank Sean Kelly for joining us today on What's the Big Idea, sharing his thoughts about innovative ways to bring a virtual team together and deepen communications despite the distance, and making today's show, of course, educational and entertaining. I'd also like to thank our viewers for watching. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a show for What's the Big Idea. I'm your host, Hank Boyer, reminding you to use the big ideas that you heard here today to make a difference. Goodbye, folks. Until next time.